Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Southampton Way podcast. Now, this is a bit of a special occasion as such, a little bit of a side pod as such, because we've managed to get a very, very special guest who is an absolute icon of our football club. A man who made 400 plus appearances, scoring 165 goals and assisting 43. A goal involvement every other game speaks for itself and is the reason the man is dubbed Le God. Matthew Le Tissier, thank you so much for joining me and Martin. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thanks very much. No, it's good to be here.
He's a player we would need right now. I tell you, Matt, if we had a Matthew Le Tissier now, we'd have a hell of a chance of staying in the division. I've seen this man get us out of so many terrible situations. But, honestly, what a player, Josh. What a player.
Unreal. Unbelievable.
Thank you very much.
We'll sort of go through things with you, Matt, because we're in a very similar sort of sticky situation now as we have been in the past. I did want to touch on a couple of things about sort of that period of time. But I wanted to start with environment because I've seen a few things that you've said in the past. I watched your soccer box you did with Gary Neville, and I found a bit really interesting about talking about the Dell and the impact the Dell had on opposition teams visiting. Do you think I've asked the question to the guys, but I wanted to get it from your point of view. Do you think that it almost was a hindrance to us moving at the time that we did to where we did?
I think in one way it was a hindrance, and I think the biggest part of that was the fact that at the Dell, the crowd was so close to the pitch, it was quite intimidating for opposition players. You know, they weren't used to having such an intimate feel to football matches. And I think having that, and when that crowd is on your side and they're so close to the pitch, it makes a hell of a difference, I think, to the players. And that's one of the things that I've kind of stressed to people who have asked me questions about this season. And yes, it's been really hard to watch at times. But the most important thing for me is that I think the fans have to realise that their positivity and their support can make a big difference to the players on the pitch, and I don't know really hardly any players in my time who actually played better because the crowd started booing them. You know, it's so counterproductive. You know, I can't begin to explain how much better it is for the players when the crowd is on their side and up for it, and you know, really vocally behind the team. It can lift them to heights that perhaps the players didn't even think they were capable of.
Yeah, I can agree with that. As much as being a supporter, it can make you want to tear your hair out at points watching what we have to watch sometimes. It is probably more counterintuitive. Martin, I'll let you hop in and ask Matt a question in a sec, but I do have another one quickly. Before you do, just you know, Marman was an avid season ticket holder at the Dell, and one of the main things that he said was about how sort of packed in it was. Did you that more on sort of the move to St Mary's? When we moved to St Mary's, was that sort of the biggest thing, having the fans sort of more dispersed and spread out, and like the arrangement of sort of away fans and things like that?
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it. You know, I think you know, at the Dell, kind of you knew the areas where the singing was going to come from, but because it was so intimate, so compact, you know, sometimes it just kind of rang around the whole stadium at once. Whereas at St Mary's, you don't kind of really get that. You get the pockets of bits of singing, but it's very, very rare that I've heard at St Mary's where the whole ground is in unison behind the team. But I think you've got that quite often at the Dell.
I totally agree with Matt on that. I went to the Dell a lot as a kid and as a teenager. I think they maybe missed a little bit of a trick when we went to St Mary's, like with the way it was designed, and there's like that, there's so much space around it. It was just like one of these standard stadiums that were being put up at the time. You know, Leicester was one. There was stadium like that, Derby County. They were all
Derby,
so
yeah,
similar,
yeah.
weren't they? They were all
Reading,
so
I think.
similar. Just missed a trick.
Yeah. I think we did. I think when you look now at, I'm not saying we had that kind of money to spend, but when you look at what Spurs did with their ground, I don't know if you've been up to Spurs' new ground. You know, what they did with that was pretty special in terms of, you know, what they've come up with to make sure that they didn't lose any of the atmosphere of the old ground. And yeah, we were kind of just a one-size-fits-all bowl stadium that, you know, you could be walking into, as you say, the Stadium of Light, you know, Derby. You kind of walked into those grounds and you just went, oh, it's like our ground, but a different colour. You know, the seats were a different colour, and that was kind of it. So yeah, it did lose a bit of, it lost a bit of character, I think, moving from the Dell to St Mary's. Although, you know, it's a lovely stadium and everyone gets a really good view. You don't have pillars in your way, obstructed views, and all that kind of stuff. But you are kind of that much further away from the pitch than you used to be, and you don't quite get that same intimate feel. You know, at the Dell, you almost felt like you could have a conversation with the players. You know, you were that close to them, and you really got a feel for the intensity of the football match. I don't think you get that when you sit so far away from the pitch.
Yeah, I think modern stadiums are all sort of out of touch with that. And when you do get a chance to travel to a sort of older ground, you realize it dawns on you that is the biggest sort of difference between the two, not just capacity, but how close everyone is, and the real feel you get for the game is totally different. With regards to feel, not just off the pitch but on it, when you're in a situation where you do need not just the crowd support but each other's support in the dressing room, who would you, as a footballer and as the man you were back then, when we were in such difficult trying circumstances in the league, who would be the sort of main person that for example the dressing room would look to? Would it be the coach, or was there sort of a certain type of character in the dressing room?
I think kind of the manager helps a little bit, but I think ultimately you would look to your teammates. You know, the more experienced teammates. You know, so at times that would have been somebody like a Jimmy Case or a Glenn Cockrell, and then, you know, as we went through the 90s, you know, people like Jason Dodd, Franny Benali. You know, I'd like to put myself in that category, although I wasn't really a shouter and a screamer on the pitch. I felt like I could always lead by example. So I hoped kind of when I got into my kind of mid to late 20s that the younger players would be looking to me to, you know, guide them through and set an example for what we were going through. And so, yeah, there was plenty of different players who had different characteristics down the years, but, you know, the main thing that everyone had going for them was that you knew if you were in the trenches and you wanted someone beside you, you know, I would quite happily take Franny Benali beside me, Jimmy Case, Glenn Cockrell, Jason Dodd, those kind of players. And I think the one key thing that kind of shines through with those players is that we all had an affinity for the football club. You know, we all loved playing for our football club, and we all cared what happened to our football club. And sometimes I've had the impression down the years that we haven't always had that with the groups of players that we've had.
Yeah, can you? I totally agree with you, by the way, and I kind of have a sort of rough time period in my head. But do you feel like there was almost like a period of time where that sort of fell away or started to crumble away? That real like care and grit, because I mean it's definitely more recent, isn't it, than not?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of. I felt like it went away during the season that we got relegated. You know, we brought in quite a few players who didn't really have, you know, bought a few players on loan who didn't have that affinity with the football club and didn't really care if we got relegated or not because they weren't going to be there the following season. And I think that's a big thing to take into account. So I think we did. And when we went down, we kind of went through a whole load of managers in quick succession. We had the Dutch guys that came in, and it wasn't really until, for me, when we'd kind of gone down to League One and the takeover happened, that we started to kind of get a little bit of something going again. It felt like we had players then who felt like they cared for the club. So you had, Ricky Lambert came in, Jose Font came in, Kelvin Davis was obviously already at the club, and I think Kelvin was one of those players who kind of really got everything back going again, and kind of helped along that team spirit that we used to have. And so I think he was a pretty key part of all that. And it was really sad to see, how he ended up in his relationship with the football club, and how his sacking came about.
Yeah, that was a shame because Super Kel is, and again, you don't use the word lightly, but he's a bit of a legend, isn't he? And Martin, you're more of a goalkeeping man than me, and I know you've got a big love for men like Kelvin Davis. And I'll let you jump in 2 secs and throw another one. But Matt, I did want to ask you if it's all right, because I've seen it's quite well documented that there was a particular coach that came in. At the time we were really struggling, and it'd be and sort of had that lift and helped the dressing room as such. And I think Alan Ball is the man who did that at the time. Do you think that first of all, what was it like to work with a man like Alan Ball? And second of all, is there any sort of like Alan Balls around anymore? Or was he just the one?
Yeah, so it's a couple of good questions. But certainly, Bawley taking over at the football club was a massive thing for me personally, and I think it was a key factor in the club staying up the season that we did. That 93-94 season when Ian Bramford had started the season as manager. Things weren't going particularly well. I think we were kind of bottom of the league when Branny was sacked. We managed to win the one game in between the Bramford and Bawley started when Dave Merrington was caretaker manager for one game. It might have been two, actually. I think we might have been FA Cup replay in there somewhere. But anyway, we beat Coventry at home 1-0 with a penalty. And then Alan Ball came in. And honestly, it was incredible the transformation in the feeling that everybody had when they were going into training. All of a sudden, everyone was looking forward to training. All of a sudden, the mood around the place was the vibe around the place was just so much higher tempo to everything. The crack in the changing room, the standard of the training kind of just all went up. And, you kind of get that if you've got the aura that Alan Ball had from being a World Cup winner. That's a massive thing. When you walk into that changing room as a new manager, and nobody really knows what you're like as a manager or a coach, but just on your right shoulder you've got the World Cup winners medal, and that carries a lot of weight with footballers. If they know that you've been there to the very top and done it all, and you're a cracking player yourself, you've got more of a chance of kind of getting that changing room to really get behind you. And the brilliant thing from my point of view was that he rated me, and he wanted to build the team around me, and so that was kind of a massive jump for me from having a manager who kind of was only really playing me because if he didn't, the crowd would go mental. It was I kind of went from that to all of a sudden this manager going, right, you're the best in our team and you can go wherever you want, and we're just going to try and get the ball to you whenever we can. And I was like, oh my God, this is like all my dreams come true. And so that was pretty incredible. And, we were in a pretty dire position when he came in, and we managed to get out of it, albeit on the last day of the season. And it was pretty nail biting in that running. But that was probably for me uh, the best period of my career when Borley was my manager for those 18 months, but especially those first few months. I think I scored something like 17 goals from the second week of January when he took over to the end of the season. It was pretty prolific, and it was all because he kind of had that belief in me, and that he kind of let me do what I wanted to do on a football pitch. So that was pretty amazing.
Would that go down as one of the greatest escapes you were involved in, Matt, that year?
I think it probably would, because given where we were in January, and I don't think there had been, I'm not sure there'd been a team that had been bottom at that time of the year at that time that had stayed up for quite some time. So that was pretty special. I mean, we had a couple of other tasty escapes. I think 98, 99, I think it might have been, when we beat Bolton away and then beat Everton at home, I think.
So when Marion Pahar's come in?
When Marion Pahar's scored too. Actually, it was Marion Pahar's on the last day of the season. I can't remember where we were. It might have been Delhurst Park. I think where we went to Wimbledon and took 10,000. I think that was the same season, because I think we won that game, and then we thought we were going to stay up, and then something happened late on in another game. Because I remember being out on the pitch after the game celebrating, and then hearing that somebody else had scored. So now we needed something. We had to get something against Everton the following weekend, and so that was that was pretty nerve-wracking. But Marion was brilliant that day. Beats was brilliant that day, and that was a pretty special feeling as well. So that one would probably rival the 93-94 escape.
And you spoke about players that wanted to wear the shirt. Those boys wanted to wear the shirt, didn't they? Marion, and especially Beats as well. He was superb servant for our football club, but they really wanted to wear the shirt, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think that was kind of why we stayed in the league. All those times that we had the escapes, we had players who wanted to fight for the shirt. We didn't have. I don't think we had many mercenaries back in those days. And we were really fortunate with the foreign players that we brought in, that they really bought into the culture of the football club, the crack in the change room. Marion didn't speak a word of English. I mean, not one word when he first came. But, 6, 8, 9 months later, he was joining in with the crack in the change room. He was getting the humour, and it was brilliant. Yeah, all the Scandinavian lads that we brought in, Klaus and Egil and Michael Svensson, Anders Svensson, all those guys kind of really bought into what was going on in the club, and we were pretty fortunate with our foreign signings.
Do you think when you sign players from abroad, it really is important to have a core group of players already at the football club that know the place inside out, or even someone who's been there their entire career, like yourself, like a Franny, because there's such a lack of that at the moment. I think there's only one you can really think of, isn't there, in Ward-Prowse?
Yeah, I think it does make a difference. I think when players come in, they see that there's like a nucleus of players who have been there for quite some time, and who kind of really know and really get what the club is about. And can kind of knit everything together off the pitch in terms of helping new players settle in. Franny was brilliant at that kind of stuff. And most of the lads were. We kind of, when you saw a player coming in, you wanted to embrace him. You wanted him to do well. It was your teammate, and so you tried to do the best for him to help him settle off the pitch, because if he gets settled off the pitch with family and house and all that stuff, then he's going to perform better on it.
Yeah, no, I think that. I mean, naturally, as a human being, that would make sense, wouldn't it? I mean, nowadays you've got teams of people, working to help settle players in as quickly as possible and get them their houses and their cars and get everything sorted for them. But I think that personal touch at a football club, it's got to be more important than anyone gives it the time for, because not everything's money. I know money gets thrown about left, right, and centre because the sums are vast. But when you look at certain players, it almost fuels a fan's anger when you don't feel like they're trying enough
Yeah,
because money comes into it, right? But when you do have a player like a James Ward-Prowse, it's got to be so important to have someone who maybe, like you said yourself, wasn't vocally a leader, but sort of leads by example and pulls on the shirt with pride every week.
yeah. That's kind of I think makes a big difference, and it makes a difference to the fans as well if they've got somebody in the team they can identify with. Somebody who's come up through the youth system at the club and been successful in the first team. Somebody they can really hang their hat on. I mean, it puts a lot of pressure on that player, if I'm honest. And I think perhaps this season it might have weighed pretty heavy on James at times. Certainly, the first half of the season, I thought he was not quite himself. But I think since he came back from after the World Cup, I think he's kind of shown a bit more like his true form. And obviously, his goals have been important in gleaning us points that have kind of kept us in touch with the teams above us. But it just needs another big push now, because obviously games are running out, and we've got to get out that bottom three.
100%. And again, Martin, you can hop in after this one, but I do have a question about Prowse actually, because I mean, you probably know Prowse and stuff like that, but when you look at the sort of player that he is, and there's reasonable similarities to your career. I mean, you were much more of a prolific goal scorer, but at the moment, Prowse's still a one club man. He's breaking records like you were breaking records. And probably the most key things, or one of the most key things, is wholly and unfairly overlooked by international managers. What do you think the problem is with Gareth Southgate, among many things, right? But not picking Prowse for that for even the European qualifiers and the Euros last year, I thought it was outrageous. But what do you think the main thing is? Is there a big club bias, or is he just clueless as we think he is?
I mean, I'm not sure kind of the big club bias thing should really exist anymore, given the limited amount of English players that the manager's got to choose from in the Premier League. I just feel like Gareth doesn't rate James as a player. I think it's as simple as that. And I'm completely bemused that he was left out of, when you go to a major tournament and you've got a lot of spaces in your squad, that there's going to be a handful of players in every squad who aren't going to get a single minute's play, just going along for the trip. They know they're probably not going to get on the pitch. So why wouldn't you fill one of those spots with somebody who can do something that none of the other players really can? Because none of the other players can take a free kick like James Ward-Prowse can. His quality of delivery is so much better and more consistent, I would say, than any other player in that England squad. So why he wouldn't just take him along just for that alone, in a really tight game, a set piece can be the difference. And if you're playing at that level and you're playing in tight football matches, then having somebody with that ability to do that is quite a useful tool to call upon. So, yeah, I couldn't understand either why Prowse has been left out of the major tournament squads.
And you've got someone like Calvin Phillips who's played no football at all this season.
That's embarrassing. Yeah, I'd be embarrassed if, somebody who's been injured for a start, then not really good enough to get in that team in the first place, has played hardly any minutes of Premier League football, and there he is in the England squad. Now, I'm sure when Gareth Southgate took over, I think one of the things he said to the media is that I will pick players on their club form. Now, something's gone amiss there, because how can he pick Calvin Phillips when he hasn't actually been playing for his club? And sometimes it just defies belief, some of the decisions that the England manager makes.
No, I agree. And it's more not just defies belief, but defies any form of logic as well in times when, he'd rather pick, for example, a Calvin Phillips or, and I put players, and it's a bit controversial, but I put players like Jordan Henderson in the same sort of bracket because, I mean, it's been quite well documented that he's there for a laugh, for being a character. Or in the dressing room, he's not really there to start football matches. And again, when you get players like Phillips come away from international break and you have a man of Pep Guardiola's knowledge saying he's overweight, he can't play, it doesn't bode well. It does not bode well at all.
No.
But yeah, I mean, enough about that, the England nonsense, because we all know Prowse should be getting picked, as you should have been back in the day, which is a whole another can of worms. But tie into that, do you? I mean, I know there was a period of time where you were quite close to sort of moving, but didn't. Do you have any sort of form of regret not making that move? Do you feel like you possibly would have then been able to go on and achieve more or get those caps that you deserved, or do you feel just in your decision making at the time?
I don't do regrets. First and foremost, I had a wonderful 17 years at Southampton Football Club, and if I had my time again, I'd probably make the same decisions again. And yes, I came very close to joining Spurs when I was 21. That was obviously the team that I supported as a boy. And I made a very late decision to not go. And to this day, I honestly can put my hand on my heart and I don't have a single regret about the decisions that I made in my career. Even though I know, I mean, you can't be certain, but I'd say probably 90% I would know that had I moved, I would probably have had more England caps. But that's not something that was, in my hands. The picking of the England squad is in the hands of the England manager, and if he doesn't think you're good enough, no matter who you are or who you're playing for, he's not going to pick you. And so yeah, I don't have a single regret.
I mean, it's brilliant. It's brilliant to hear as a fan, first and foremost. But it almost makes you feel like, wouldn't it be nice if we had something like that now? But it's just not how it is at the moment. So, in terms of this season, have you been sort of following as closely as all of us, and what have you made of it so far? First of all, we'll talk about the coaching appointments. How have you found it? Were you sort of at the beginning? Were you Ralph in, Ralph out, or what was your opinion on Ralph this season?
I mean, I think a lot of people could have stomached Ralph being sacked had they kind of appointed somebody who was going to take the club on and do a better job than Ralph was doing. In hindsight now, you've got to say it was a poor decision. Looking back on it and seeing what happened with Nathan in charge, so I quite liked Ralph. I'll be honest. I've met him a few times. Liked him as a bloke. I liked the way that the team went about their business when they were really at it and positive, and really doing that pressing really well, which at times they did. We had some really good spells under him where we would go 10, 11, 12 games undefeated. But and then you look at the 9-0s and you go, oh, blimey, he did well to escape, with his job losing 9-0 twice. But I thought after the first 9-0, I thought he kind of really galvanised everything, did a really good job. And so I think it was, looking back now, I think I would prefer, I don't think we'd be bottom of the league now had they not sacked Ralph, is how I feel about it. I think he had that something that he could get a tune out of the games, and the really annoying part is that period of time when Nathan Jones was manager was during a period of time when we had a lot of winnable games. We played a lot of teams that were not in the top six, and we just, we blew every single chance of picking up points during that time. So that was a real crucial time of the season for me, and I think that if we do go down, we'll look on that time of the season as the bit that got us relegated.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. I wanted to kind of touch upon the recruitment. How did you feel about the recruitment in the summer? Did you just feel we went a little bit too young with the calibre of players that we brought in? That there was not a great deal of experience. There was a lot of young players coming to that squad. You brought a 19-year-old goalkeeper in to play in the Premier League, and it's a brutal league, isn't it? You get found out really quickly, don't you?
Yeah, you do indeed, and I don't think it would take a genius to work out that yes, the ages of the players that we were signing meant that yes, we'd have some good fresh legs in there. But you're right, you do need, especially if you're going to be in a dogfight, you do need that experience in the team, and not just in kind of one or two players. You can kind of get away with maybe two or three youngsters in a relegation scrap. If they're really giving something to the team and they've got a load of old heads around them. But when you've got a really inexperienced team, it's tough. In the heat of the battle, in the heat of a relegation battle, it's difficult for these youngsters to really shine and show their true potential when there's so much pressure on them, given where we are in the league.
Yeah, on team selection, specifically those signings, is there any particular signing that you've watched this season and you've been impressed with, actually more than disappointed? Is there any other signings from the summer or January that you've gone, he's a player? I can see why they brought him in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lavia has got huge potential. I know he picked up that injury, which put him out for a few weeks early on, but I thought he started the season brilliantly. And I think we really missed him, when he was out injured. I think we had a pretty poor run of form, and I think a lot of that could be down to the fact that we missed him. And that's kind of sad in itself when so early on in the season you're missing an 18-year-old central midfielder. That kind of tells you everything. So I think I was really impressed with him. I don't think he's got back to those levels just yet of how he was the first few games of the season. But again, that's a youngster, and they will have ups and downs in form. I knew it myself. You just have dips. You have good spells. You have bad spells, and hopefully you'll have a good spell come the end of the season, and can really push us on and get us out of the trouble we're in. I like Sulemana as well. I think Sulemana's got potential. Yeah. I think if he can get his first goal under his belt, I think that will give him a huge amount of confidence. And then I think you could see a player who is capable of winning you football matches almost single-handedly if he really kind of gets his confidence in front of goal, because he's got great feet, great pace, and he can get himself into really good positions. If he could just finish them off, he could be really dangerous. And he's probably the closest thing I've seen to a kind of Rodney Wallace, Sadio Mane type player for us. And so hopefully he can get a goal soon and we can see the best of him.
Yeah, fingers crossed, because it's been a little bit hot and cold. But I agree. He does look really, really good when he really hit the ground running, especially against Wolves. I thought he was unbelievable. I'll ask you quickly before Martin can hop in once more about the ownership group, because obviously it's been obviously been a huge talking point since Sport Republic took over last year, given that everyone was so adamant we wanted the Zhao regime to end after quite a successful reign under the Liebers. I know there was that period where obviously the Zhaos and Lander Sports come in and that, but everyone wanted them gone, and then we've been given this fresh new group of owners that seemed amazing after that 4-1 win against Brentford. It thought, this looks amazing. It hasn't quite been that. What do you feel like this is one? Give it some time. Do you see signs that this is the right model for us, or is it all a bit worrying?
Well, obviously, where we are in the league is concerning. But what you can't point the finger at is they've put money into the club and they've given manager transfer funds, the likes of which I don't think any other manager at this football club has had to spend without actually selling, the crown jewels. There's been a lot of money spent in the summer, another big chunk of money spent in January. So the one thing you can't criticise them is for their ability to put their hand in their pocket, because I think they've done that more than any other regime at the club. I think you then have to really kind of look at the money that was available. Your next port of call is to look at the scouting department and the recruitment department to see, okay, they've had the money. What have they spent it on? Have we got value for the money that we've spent? And you have to say at this point in time, we haven't really. The players that have come in haven't really kind of lived up to the money that's been spent on them. And so I think if you're going to, as ever, the manager always, is the one that gets sacked. But I think sometimes you also have to look at the recruitment department. If the manager hasn't been, the key element in all of that, then is he really the one that should be being sacked?
I agree. I totally agree. It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it, with Sport Republic? Because, like I said before, we had quite a hands-on ownership with the Libers, especially when we sort of came up into the Premier League, and we had Cortese and Les Reed sort of running the whole thing, and it all seemed to work swimmingly. And then it all sort of fell apart, and we sold to the Chinese. And then everybody hated that as well. I think we do need to sort of be careful what we're wishing for at the moment, because it is so fresh. And like you say, we haven't had to sell anybody, which I know from watching you on Soccer Saturday over so many years, that was always a fear of yours, that we might just push it that too far in selling too many players, and it'll all sort of fall apart on us. Martin, did you have anything you wanted to hop in and chat about that specifically, about the ownership? Because you were at the fans forum with them, weren't you?
Yeah, I was going to talk about the fans forum. Yeah, they're confident that they've got a good back in there. The guy that's backing it, and they feel that if we do go down, obviously they want pray that we don't. But if they do, they don't feel there have to be mass redundancies. They don't feel they have to have massive colour players. That they will try and keep the nucleus together and try and pull the club straight back up. If we do go down, I'd be fairly confident that they would get us back up. That's my opinion. I might be totally wrong, but I like to think that they will back it and they will come back.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think if they're making all those noises and they're making those assurances, if they follow through with that, then of course if the worst does happen, it does kind of give you a little bit of confidence that it's not the end of the world, and it's not going to be a massive fire sale, and we're going to be going down the route that we did the last time we got relegated. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, there's somewhat comfort, although like we say, nobody wants to go down. But before I let you go, Matt, I'll quickly ask you about our upcoming fixture and how you feel us doing for the rest of the season. West Ham at the weekend. How are you feeling with regards to that? I mean, I caught you outside the ground at the Spurs game, so I know you were there watching that madness happen. What was the what did you feel about that second half in the Tottenham game, and how do you feel going into the game against West Ham? How could we do it at the weekend?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, that was probably the most entertainment I'd seen at St Mary's for quite some time. In the way that we came back, I loved the way that went 3-1 down and the team got together in the pitch, had a little huddle, and obviously something was said in that, and they really showed a lot of spirit. I mean, we might have been a bit fortunate to have got the penalty in the last minute, but I thought Prowse showed huge amount of character to step up and stick that in the top corner, given what had happened to his previous couple of penalties. I think that game kind of gave us a bit of renewed hope going into the final kind of 10 or so games of the season. And I think going into this game, particularly against West Ham, it was very important that we did not lose that football match against Spurs. So I think that penalty, if we go on to win the game on Sunday, I think that penalty could be, one of the most crucial things that happened to us this season.
Matt, when you look at our running, I've kind of broken it into like 5 sections really. So I'm looking at those first 5 games. West Ham away. We obviously got City at home the week after. Then we got Palace, another tough one with Arsenal, then Bournemouth. They're winnable games in amongst those tough games.
Yep.
Do you feel that we've got enough when it comes against we look back at the fixture, we don't need to go over them all, but there's been some key moments that we've just failed to get the result that we needed against a rival. Do you feel that we can go into these games and get the results that we need against the teams in and around us?
Yeah, I think with the right attitude, I think we can, and that is the attitude that we saw in the second half against Spurs when we went 3-1 down. I think if you carry that attitude through the entire game and go into it with that mentality, then there's every chance that we can pull out results. But what we don't need to do is go into those games fearful, go into those games with any kind of negativity. And I don't mean just the players' mentality. I think the manager's mentality, the manager's formations, the team that he picks. I think he has to be very positive. We've got to have players in the team who can threaten and create chances and score goals. And that's been our biggest problem. We haven't had that regular goal scorer of the season. I think Prowse is our top scorer. So it's never brilliant when your top scorer is not one of your forwards first and foremost, and also not even in double figures yet for the season at this time of the year. So those things are both a bit concerning.
We just need to have a go now, don't we? These last few games, just really take it to teams and just stop being so passive and just not looking to lose. You've got to win games now, haven't you?
I mean, I think if I was the manager, I'd probably sit down the players and get them to watch the 90 minutes against Man City in the Carabao Cup and go, right, there's your benchmark. That's what you're capable of. And that's what I want to see for the last 10 games of the season. And if that means playing that match to them before every single game between now and the end of the season to remind them, then that's what I'll be doing. Because that wasn't a fluke that night.
Yeah, it just shows what they can do when they're at it. But like you say, it comes down to team selection, formation, and just having a go now. Like you say, you've got to get the players that can win your football games on the field, don't you?
Yeah, and you've got to be positive. You've got to try and win. You can't be going into games, looking to sneak a point at this stage of the season. That it's not really cutting it.
I agree. And just before we do end, I just want to grab your quick thoughts on Ruben Selles as a coach, because obviously he's never been a manager before. He's got a massive chance to try and lead us to safety now with these last 10 games and his first. I think he's had 7 now. As a man, as a manager as well.
Well, obviously, it's very early on in his managerial career. Obviously, he's been behind the scenes there for a while, so he's kind of known. He's seen managers come and go, and hopefully, he's learnt. Sometimes you've got to learn what not to do as well as what to do, and so he's been behind the scenes, witnessing different managers and the way they've gone about things. He'll have his own ideas. I think, kind of, there was. Obviously, the Grimsby game was a game where it was like, wow, what's happened here? And that's not a really good defeat to have as a manager in your early career when you're losing at home to a League Two team. I mean, that was a real blot on the copybook, really. And I was quite surprised. I know first game against Chelsea, we picked up the 3 points. But I was really surprised that the day before the Leeds game that they decided, right, this is it for the rest of the season. I was like, well, hang on a minute, it's just one game. Let's calm down a bit and let's see how we go against Leeds. And then, of course, we don't even threaten the goal against Leeds. I watched that game and we barely looked like scoring at all. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised that they were so quick to give him the job, given the lack of experience that he's had in that position. and kind of given those two defeats against Leeds and Grimsby back to back, were not particularly good. In fact, the 3 defeats that we've had, I mean, the Brentford game I was up there for that, and blimey, I mean, that was as poor a performance as I've seen from us for a long time. We didn't really threaten Brentford at all. Barely ever got excited during the game, which is, it's not nice to sit through 90 odd minutes of football and not really kind of, have that little bit of a buzz that, we're really pushing, we're having chances, and the goalie's making good saves. It wasn't like that at all. It was, kind of the writing was on the wall in that game very early on.
We cannot afford any performances like those, can we? Jeez, because we're going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah, I mean, 23 points at the moment, and I think probably 36, 37 points is about the mark, I would say, for teams staying up. It might be a little bit more because it's so tight down there, but there's a lot of teams who will have to pick up quite a few victories. So I'm thinking 4 wins and 2 draws from the last 10 games. When you then look at the fixtures, you can see 4 wins in there if we go into those games with the right attitude. So all is not yet lost, and make sure we stick behind the team.
I think that is a brilliant note to end on. Get behind the team. We've got 10 games to do it, and it is not lost on us just yet. Matt, thank you so much for joining me and Martin. It's an absolute privilege to have you. Hopefully it's not the last time,
It has
but
been brilliant.
it's fantastic for a first time. You're an absolute hero for many, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, mate. You're welcome. Cheers, guys.
Thank you, Matt. See you, mate.